Hello and welcome to today's EuroSTAR webinar, Intelligent Mistakes in Test Automation with Dorothy Graham. My name is Miriam and I will be your webinar moderator for today. And before we hand over to Dot, I'd just like to bring a few things to your attention. So we will do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar with Dot, and in order to ask her a question, you can type in any question you like into the control panel on the right, which you can see in the current slide. The webinar will also be recorded and we will send you the recording when we have it ready. So for slides, we will put all slides on the blog and we will also email these to you as well. If you're on Twitter, make sure you use the hashtag ESConts when tweeting and mention @Dorothy Graham as well. So before I hand you over to Dot, we're going to start with some polls that Dot has created. So we'll just put the first one up and it's about Dorothy's latest book. Now we'll just wait for the votes to come in. Just give it a few more seconds now to give everyone a chance to vote. Okay, we're nearly there now. Okay, let's close the poll and we'll share the results. Now, can you see those results, Dot?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. We'll start with the second poll. So now, okay. So the question is, who are you? Okay, the votes are coming in. Just a few more seconds now, so we'll just give everyone a chance to get their vote in. Okay, now we'll close this poll as well. Now, Dot, can you see those results?
Oh, yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. So will I hand over to you now, Dot?
Okay.
Okay, let's just change.
So can you see my screen?
I can indeed, Dot, and if you just make it into full screen, that'll be great. Perfect.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this webinar, and thank you to EuroSTAR for inviting me to come. I'm talking about intelligent mistakes in test automation. What is an intelligent mistake? Sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. A mistake is an action resulting from defective judgment or misconception or misunderstanding, but something which is intelligent is exercising good judgment. So I reckon an intelligent mistake is an action based on a faulty premises with the best of intentions, but which actually has adverse consequences. So we're going to look at 4 of these in test automation, which I find are common things that people do believe, and they do seem sensible when you first look at them, but in actual fact they can be dangerous or harmful. Automation should find lots of bugs. Let's automate all of our manual tests. Testing tools are tools for testers, and return on investment is essential for automation. So first of all, we'll look at, is it a good idea for automation? Should automation find lots of bugs? Well, this seems like a very sensible approach, doesn't it? After all, we're automating our tests, and tests find bugs, and automation will be more thorough and faster. Therefore, automation should find more bugs, and should find them quicker as well, right? This seems very sensible. It sounds very plausible. But unfortunately, it's wrong. And the problems are we're confusing what testing is with what automation is, and they are different. And their goals and objectives should be different. Should automation find bugs? No, actually, automation does not find bugs. What finds bugs are tests. So it's not the automation that finds the bugs, it's the tests that find the bugs. The bug-finding ability of a test is not affected, or at least not affected very much, by the manner in which it is run. Any given test, if you run that test manually, if it's capable of finding a bug and that bug is there, it will find the bug. If you run that test using a tool, if that bug is there and it's capable of finding it, it will find it. So automation is a mechanism for running tests. Automation is a test-running activity. It's not a bug-finding activity. And confusing these things together can be what is harmful. Now, finding bugs is a great objective for testing. It's an excellent objective for testing, but it can be a harmful objective for automation. Often it's not a good one, particularly if you're automating regression testing. Now, when good quality testing is effective, if there's a bug there, we'll find it. But automation is about efficiency. So what we're doing here is confusing effectiveness and efficiency. Now, if we have manual testing, the efficiency is low because we have slow testing. If we have automated testing, we have fast testing, so our efficiency is much higher. So obviously, faster testing is better, right? Well, if you don't consider the other dimension of this, which is the effectiveness of the testing, you may have, if you have manual testing, it might be poor quality slow testing. And if you automate those poor quality tests, you will just have, I'm often quoted by saying this, that you'll have automated chaos is just faster chaos. By the way, if you find yourself in the left-hand lower quadrant with poor testing manually, you will get more benefit by going up to the upper left-hand quadrant and improving your testing and getting good testing rather than automating what you have. Of course, the best benefits are here, where we have good quality testing, which is also automated, so it's both effective and efficient. But you may well find yourself down here if you don't consider the effectiveness of your tests. Automation is a mechanism for running tests, whatever quality those tests are. But it's more important to have good quality tests. What sort of tests are we thinking about? Regression tests or exploratory tests, to take sort of one extreme to another? The bug-finding ability of regression tests is actually quite low. The bug-finding ability, or the likelihood of finding bugs for exploratory testing, is very high. Another aspect is, when is this the first time a test has been run? The first time a test is run, its bug-finding ability is at its highest. When a test is run more often, either that bug will have been fixed by now, or it will find the same bug that's been found before, so it gives you less value. So bugs that are run before are on the left-hand side, bugs that are run for the first time are on the right-hand side. But what is typically automated? Most often, people are automating regression tests. I'm talking of system-level automation here. Obviously, when people are doing agile and automating unit-level tests, that's a slightly different situation. And there, you might be more likely to find bugs when you're running tests when they're automated, because they might be, the first time they're run, might be in their automated form. So most often, regression tests are automated, and regression tests are the things which are least likely to find bugs. Now, of course, as with any rule, there are exceptions to this. Sometimes the automated tests do find bugs, particularly when the first run of that test is in its automated form. So, for example, if you're doing high-level keyword-driven testing, where the users are writing the tests into a spreadsheet, and then the automation will pick up those tests and run them, so the first time they're run is in their automated form, then they will be finding bugs. Or if you're using model-based testing, where the tests are generated from a model, again, the first time the test is run is in its automated form. And perhaps if you're doing testing in Agile, the first time your tests are run are when they are in their automated form. Then that's fair enough. But actually, it's not the automation that is finding those bugs, is it? It's the test. And it's the fact that this is the first time that test has been run. Well, another interesting thing, what about when we have our tests automated, we can find bugs in parts that we wouldn't have tested otherwise, surely then we're finding more bugs by the automation. Well, in a sense, yes, we have. But again, it's not because those tests are automated. The reason is because we are running more tests. So finding bugs in parts we wouldn't have tested otherwise is actually an indirect result of automating the tests. It's a direct result of running more tests. If we were to get in, say, another 20 testers for a week and have them run more tests, we would find more bugs in parts we hadn't tested before. So it's not, again, it's not due to the automation, it's due to the fact that more tests are being run. Now, you might be thinking, okay, come on, Bob, you're being a bit pedantic here. And yes, maybe I am, but I really think this distinction is important. And the reason is, if you are automating regression tests and have find lots of bugs as your goal, you are extremely likely to fail. In fact, I met a manager recently who was going to can the automation effort, which was sounded like a reasonable regression test automation, because it wasn't finding very many bugs. Regression tests by their nature don't find many bugs. So if you're automating regression testing, the objectives should be different to find lots of bugs. And I can't go into what the objectives should be, but just as a little commercial plug here, I am giving a full-day tutorial at EuroSTAR on the Monday on successful test automation, managing successful test automation. Okay, let's look at the next one. Let's automate all of our manual tests. Well, that sounds like a good idea, doesn't it? Certainly seems very sensible. We've got lots of tests already being done manually. Automation would be much quicker. In fact, let's take this even further. We could be completely automated. Let's automate 100% of our manual tests. And now, of course, we have no need for any manual tests, and therefore we probably don't need manual testers either. I'm going to talk a bit more about this second point in the next point. But yes, this seems sensible, and it sounds very plausible, but it's wrong. The problems are all of the manual tests better as automated tests? That's one aspect. Another aspect is, if you automate only your current manual tests, you are definitely having suboptimal automation, and you're missing a lot of benefits. Let me show you this in a diagram. Here are our manual tests. Here are our automated tests. So these are the ones that we've automated so far. Should we be trying to merge these two together and have all of our manual tests automated? These are the ones we haven't automated yet. I don't think so. I think there are some tests in this space that are not worth automating or that shouldn't be automated. Tests to do with usability. Do the colors look nice? What Michael Bolton mentioned charisma. I like that term. Another thing is, you know, if you go on a website and you have to type in some letters that are in a very strange form that you can hardly read them, CAPTCHA. Well, the whole point of CAPTCHA is that it shouldn't be able to be done by a machine, but only by a human being. So if you were to automate the testing of that, you would have proved it wrong, because the whole point is it shouldn't be able to be done by a computer. It should only be able to be done by a person. So it shouldn't be automated. So that's one thing. Not all manual tests should be automated, but on the other side, there are things that we can automate that are very difficult, if not impossible, to do manually. One example is the verification of the tests. If you're running a test and you can see what's on your screen in terms of what the answer is, but you don't really know if you're testing manually whether all of those GUI objects are in the correct state. But if you have an automated test, you can check behind the scenes. You can see if things are in the correct state. Another aspect is tests that require some kind of random input and some kind of computer-based algorithm or oracle for checking the results. Things like monkey testing or exploratory test automation, which sounded like an oxymoron to me when I first heard about it. But it's a way of generating many tests with an oracle which is not very fine-grained. In other words, you don't have an exact answer, but you have ballpark answers. And if the answers are in the right ballpark, you assume they're correct, which of course is an assumption that might be wrong, but it will certainly pick up the things that are wildly out and bring them to the attention of a human being. Now, we also don't want to just have automated tests. We actually want to have automated testing. Here's what I mean by that. Here are some automated tests. Our execution and comparing results are an automated process, but these automated tests are embedded in a manual process. First, we have to select which test cases to run. We have to set up a test environment for a test suite. For each test case, there may be some setup. Then we have our execution and compare results, log results, analyze failures, report defects, clear up both for the test case and the test suite, and summarize results. Is that automated testing? Well, we do have automated tests, but what we really want to have is automated testing, where the minimum of things are done manually. Some things always still have to be done manually, but we want to automate as much as possible around the automation, if that makes sense. So we still have to decide which test cases to run, but we want to automate setting up the test environment, both for the suites and for each test case. We still have the execution and comparing results. We want to automate logging of results and clearing up after both the test case and the test suite, and summarizing results. We still need to analyze failures. That's what testers need to do. We need to look at them and report defects. But much more on the right-hand side has been automated. So we have automated testing by thinking outside the box, by thinking of more than just the test execution and comparison, what the test execution tools do, and doing more, having more automated stuff around the automation. Let me show you a diagram for that. Automation plus, I've called it. Traditional test automation is execution of the tests and comparison of results. But we would be much better off by not stopping there. That's really what's on the left-hand side of the previous diagram. We want to have additional things around it. Things like the use of a domain-specific test language and structured testware, a good testware architecture, which I'll talk about in a moment. We want to have the pre- and post-processing, which you saw an example of, setting up the data and clearing up afterwards. We want to have metrics being gathered automatically. We want to know what the benefit is of the automation. We might want to measure something like the equivalent manual test effort, which gives an idea of how much testing has been done and how long by comparing it to how long it would have taken if you do it manually. We want to loosen the oracles, not have them tight to be exact matches, but to have them be ballpark, using exploratory test automation or monkey testing. We want to have general utilities and useful things. Automation, little scripts or automation can be used to do just useful little things sort of around the automation itself, around the software that you're testing. For example, loading data. And you also want to think about having disposable scripts. Now this sounds a bit strange because surely we want to preserve the scripts, we want to preserve the automation for a long time. And yes, that is also true, but not all of the automation should be of that long-lived category. You can very usefully do things on a very small scale, where the script doesn't have to be something which is going to be preserved forever, but just gives you something useful for the next half an hour. I was having a chat with Rob Saberin the other day, and he said he's seeing this increasingly being used in Agile, and it's a great idea. Jonathan Cole has written a chapter in our book talking about testing outside the box, which describes this sort of thing. So now we have our automation surrounded by other stuff. In fact, what you can do now, when you have this other stuff around, is sometimes you can use some of that other stuff to help you with the manual testing. So you have the manual testing embedded in an automation context, rather than on the previous side, which we saw the automation embedded in a manual process. So hopefully that's convinced you that automating all of our manual tests is not necessarily the best idea. Now at this point I'm going to hand back to Miriam because we have another poll.
Thanks, Dot. I'll just launch that for you now.
Are you there, Miriam?
Now, Everybody, please take a moment to vote in the next poll, please. Okay, the votes are coming in. Just give you all another chance. Okay, let's close those now and let's share the results. So, Dot, can you see those results?
No, I can't actually.
Okay, it might just take a second. Can you see them now?
Can you just tell me what they are?
I can, of course. So,
no, I think I'd have to get out of it.
I'll just call them out to you there, Dot. So 16% went with every tester should be able to write code. 68% went with the second, testers can be automators if they want to. 14% went with testers shouldn't have to become automators, and just 2% went with testers should never be automators. Okay, so I'll just pass back to you.
Much.
Thank you, Dot.
Okay. So is my screen showing now?
Yes, Dot, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for that. That's I find that very interesting. There seems to be a lot of discussion about whether testers should be automators and how closely they should be tied to the tools. So, I mean, should testing tools be just for testers? Are the testers the ones who should be working directly with it? It seems very sensible. The testers do testing, and testing tools help with testing, and the tools will make them better testers because they'll be able to run more tests and faster. It seems very sensible. It sounds very plausible, but it's wrong. It assumes, in a way, that the tools are a form of testing, and also probably that the tools would provide instant benefits. A common attitude by managers, and we mentioned this briefly in the previous point, we can reduce the number of testers once we have the tool. If you think we're going to have all of our manual tests are automated, then we don't need any testers anymore. Well, I would like to ask someone who thinks they can get rid of their testers once they have a tool some questions about what their testers are like. So, what are your testers like? Are your testers, or are you as a tester, someone who has to have an extremely detailed script in front of them at all times and slavishly follows it without deviating one iota and never puts their brain in gear? If so, you are a mindless moron. Or are you someone who, when you might have a script to work through, but all the time you're thinking about what you're doing, you're thinking about what's missing from the script, your brain is engaged, you're thinking about what the software is doing, about other things that should be tested. In other words, you are an intelligent investigator. Well, if you are a mindless moron, perhaps a tool could replace you, but I don't know any testers like that. The testers I know are the ones who are very intelligent, very active in looking at what's happening. People who are really good testers are ones who use their brains. So automation can free the testers to do more test design and more exploratory testing, and therefore find more bugs. What automation does is take away the drudgery and frees the testers up to be better testers. Tools do not replace testers. They support testers. Should the tester become the automator? Well, test automation, if you're working directly with the tools, that it is software development. It needs programming skills. The scripting languages are programming languages. I know some of the tools are moving away to that and putting in place a higher level of abstraction, which is good. But if you're working directly with a tool, you need to have programming experience. Not all testers want to become developers. Not all testers would be good at it. There might be, Hans Buwalda says, you might well lose a good tester and gain a poor programmer. I think that's a great way to sum that up. Now, there's another thing, is if the tester does become an automator, this can lead to a conflict of interest. Suppose you come in and you think to yourself, right, I'm a tester and I'm an automator. Today I'm going to do some manual testing. So you spend the day and you do maybe 20 manual tests. And at the end of the day you say, well, that was a good day. I got 20 of these major tests done. But I didn't automate anything today, so I wasn't a very good automator. So the next day you come in and you say, I'm going to automate some tests today. So you automate perhaps 4 tests. And at the end of the day you think, I did a good job on that. I've made those tests robust. They can survive things that happen. I've made sure they've got good reporting in place. Those are good automated tests. But you've only done 4 of them. Now, if you're under deadline pressure, and I assume some of you out there probably are, what happens if you have a given number of tests that have to be run in whatever form before you can release, and the release date is looming? Is your manager going to say to you, well, automation is much better long term, so therefore you carry on automating 4 tests a day. Don't worry about running 20 a day so that we can meet our release date. No, it doesn't happen that way, does it? Deadline pressure always pushes you back into manual testing. Technical expertise is needed for long-term success in automation, for widespread use and long-lived automation. And in order to do this, the testware architecture is critical. A poor architecture of the tests themselves is usually what gives a high maintenance cost. It's the most frequent cause of tools going back on the shelf and abandoned automation, which is still fairly common, I'm afraid. 20 or 30% of automation efforts still fail and tools go back on the shelf. Now, there are 2 layers of abstraction which are important. If this is our tester and this is the test execution tool, if you don't put anything in place between them, then the testers are directly using the tool. So your testers have become the automators. But the testware architecture is what should be in between the testers and the tool. And at the tool level, we want to have structured scripts. We want to have tests that are written according to good programming practices. Now, if testers have not been trained as developers, then they probably don't know about this kind of, this way of writing things. They may end up writing spaghetti tests, just like spaghetti code used to be written. And that's where you get the maintenance problems. If you get this right, you want to make sure that things that happen more than once are put in a common place so that they can be called by other scripts. You want to make sure that anything that is related directly to the tool, anything which is tool specific, those types of scripts are kept to a minimum and have a good interface, a good API to the rest of the tests. And if you do this, you will find that your tests, your testware, will survive for a long time. Because it's easy to maintain, it will survive more than one release of your software. It will also survive more than one release of your tool, because your tool will change, whatever tool you have, whether it's open source or commercial. Or you might want to run the tests in a totally different environment. You still want to have the same tests, but you might be using a different tool. It makes it much easier to do that. So that's the technical abstraction. The structure of those tests, it doesn't care what tests are running, but it wants to make sure that they are well built and well structured. The other level of abstraction is the testers, especially if they do not want to become programmers. And it's interesting that my view on the poll question is between 2 and 3. I think it's fine if testers want to become automators, but I don't think they should be forced to. And I certainly don't agree with number 1, which 16% of you said that every tester should be able to write code. I think a tester who can't write code is not worthless. You want to be able to have any tester, whether they are technical, i.e. coder, or not, be able to write and run automated tests. In order to make that happen, the technical people, the automators, need to build a framework so that the testers can just write the tests in a language which is meaningful to them, a domain-specific test language. If they're in insurance, it would be insurance keywords. If they're in mobile phones, it would be phone keywords. If it's in web, it would be web keywords. So whatever domain they're in, the keywords are related to that, The keywords are built and maintained by the technical people, but this means the testers can now write tests. They can sit down and fill in a spreadsheet or database with the tests that they want to run, and those tests are run by the automation. I heard a great quote yesterday. "I don't want to write scripts, but I do want to automate." I think that's great. This is the attitude of the people at this level. We don't want to be technical, even if we could, but we do want to write and run automated tests. If you say to someone, well, if you can't write code, then you're not a good tester, then you're throwing out people like Johanna Rothman, who said this in her webinar yesterday. And I think that's not the right thing to do. Now, Simon said, if you're not willing to code, your tests will be flaky. And he was addressing people who are doing agile testing, unit testing, people in agile teams, where you're expected to be a coder as well. But I don't think just because it works in one context means it's universally applicable. But that's my view. So if you have this high-level keywords and the domain-specific language, this means that many more people will be able to use the automation, and you will get wider use of it, and therefore more benefit. And then our last one. Return on investment is essential for automation. I've actually been changing my mind on this recently, which I'll tell you about. It certainly seems very sensible. We'll be spending time and possibly lots of money on the tools. We need to make sure it will be worth it. And a watertight business case will convince our managers to invest in the automation, obviously. Seems very sensible, sounds very plausible, but it's wrong. By the way, people are not always convinced by numbers. Most decisions are not made on a rational basis, but on an emotional basis. Sometimes, I think, if people are asking for numbers too much, I think it's just a form of resistance. But calculating return on investment is not easy. Well, I don't think it is, but perhaps I'm just simple-minded. And it can also be dangerous. And this is something which has only just occurred to me recently. I've been very keen on helping people calculate ROI for automation. In fact, I even have a spreadsheet, which I'll send you if you like. And I know in some situations you do have to have some kind of calculation for ROI to even get on the bottom step with automation. But it can be dangerous. And the reason for this is that the easiest way to measure return on investment is the most obvious one with test execution, is the time of the testers. If testers are doing manual testing, they are spending a lot of time in test execution. But if a tool can do the test execution that used to be done in 2 days in 2 hours, well, then obviously that's the benefit. And that's what we'll base our return on investment for. But the problem there is that that gives the impression that the tools have replaced the people. That what a tester could do in 2 days is now done entirely and completely by a tool in 2 hours. And that's not true. People have to build the automation for a start, but people also are involved in writing new test cases. If you think that your automation will replace the people, you're effectively saying, right, the tests we have now are complete and permanent and we'll never need any more tests. And the automation is also complete and permanent and will never be affected by anything that happens in the real world, which just simply isn't true. I love this quote from an article in the latest Automation Strategy, Automated Testing Institute magazine. Automation is an enabler for success, not a cost reduction tool. I think that if that's the attitude to automation, then you're going to get benefits. You're going to see, you're going to be concentrating on the benefits that are able to be achieved and realizing that in actual fact, if we don't automate, we may not survive. Now he was talking about mobile testing, but I think this applies universally. And thanks, Ron, for the quote. Now, one of the things that surprised us when we were doing the book on experiences of test automation, and I hope that the 50% of you who haven't heard of it before will certainly have heard of it by the end of this presentation, but we did ask people when we were liaising with them and working with them on their chapters, we said, well, what return on investment? We pushed to get that from people. And some people did give us some brilliant examples of return on investment where they got stunning results and could demonstrate them. But one thing that was surprising is that many people were still successful, but they didn't have the specific return on investment information. But one thing which was essential in order to be successful in automation is that even if you didn't have specific return on investment, they still had benefits that were there and were publicized. How can you publicize benefits of testing without doing return on investment? Oh, by the way, if you're coming to Star West in a couple of weeks' time, Bob Galen is talking about ROI being dangerous as well. Well, here's an example of how you might show benefits. The execution speed of the tests 14 times faster. The tests are run 5 times more often. We're getting 4 times more data variety or more coverage. And the tester work is 12 times less. You can see this is the most dramatic benefit, but if you base your return on investment only on that, you're missing out other things. So why are these intelligent mistakes? Should automation find bugs? Well, no, actually. It's the tests that find bugs. Automation runs the tests. So your objectives for automation should be related to efficiency, not effectiveness of the tests. Should you automate all of your manual tests? It's often a good place to start, but not all manual tests should be automated. And we need to think not just about the manual tests, but of other things around the automation and surround it with more automation and utilities and useful things. Are testing tools just for testers? Well, it's a different skill being a test automator to being a testware. And the value of the skill of testing, if you say the only good tester is a developer, I think that sets us back 10 years or more in terms of getting testing recognized as a skill in its own right. The testware architecture is critical, and that has to be built by somebody. Does automation have to achieve ROI? Well, it certainly needs to achieve something, so it needs to show benefits. But if you focus too much on calculations of ROI, particularly based on tester time, it could be dangerous. Rather than thinking we can replace these testers, think the automation is giving us 10 new testers for free. So before I hand over to Miriam to take your questions, just some information for you. I have a special secret code if you want a 10% discount for EuroSTAR. Here it is, DGM12. If you put that in at the relevant place when you're booking for EuroSTAR, that will give you a 10% discount. Things about me, my website, dorothygraham.co.uk. There are articles and papers you can download. My email, info@dorothygraham.co.uk. If you'd like to have this return on investment calculator, I'm happy to send it to you. It has a few caveats in it. And I'll put you on my list for my random newsletter. I have a blog, which I've had a few. I don't blog very often, but I've talked about automation sometimes on that. And DDP, which is a way of measuring the value of testing. I've got a Twitter account, although I don't tweet very often. And here's the book. You've heard of it now. It's called Experiences of Test Automation by myself and Mark Fuster. The whole book is case studies of automation. Most of them successes, some of them not. Even the ones that were successful found a lot of stumbling blocks along the way. And now I would like to ask a favor of you. Our book has been nominated by the Automated Testing Institute for as a finalist in the book category for the Automation Honors Awards, which will be awarded next month, I believe. And you need to vote for the book. If the book that gets the most votes will be the winner. So I would like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to go and vote for our book. And it's the athonors.automatedtestinginstitute.com, or if you go onto my website, there's a link directly to the voting page. You have to scroll down a bit. The books are the second to bottom category. By the way, feel free to vote for tools as well. It's quite an interesting idea to have the Dion Johnson organizes this website. Okay, I think that's everything I want to say, and I'll hand back to Miriam now for any questions.
Thank you, Josh. That was a great presentation. So we have a few questions coming in here. So Let me see. A lot of people are asking about the ROI calculator, and as you mentioned, if you just drop Dorothy an email at info@dorothygraham.co.uk and she will send that on to you. So, and just as well, just to remind you, as Dorothy mentioned as well, her 10% discount code for the early bird is DGM12. And if you book before tomorrow, you can save up to €200 off your conference place. So it's well worth taking a look if you are thinking about joining us in Amsterdam. So let's see what questions we have got.
Miriam, can I also mention that I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to be at the chat tomorrow because I have a prior commitment. So apologies for that.
Sure, that's great, Dot. The chat is today actually. It's on at 2. It's on after the last webinar today. That's okay. It's on after the last webinar today at 3 p.m. So we'll be sending out the link during Michael D. Kelly's webinar. That's at 2 p.m. So make sure everybody tunes in because we'll also be giving away a free conference place to those who attend it. So let's have a look at the questions. Now, okay, we've quite a few. So we'll start with this one from Amir. So Amir says, we automate the tests and add them to automated regression packs when it is verified by manual QA. Then those tests are run in the next sprints. Is that the best way, Dot?
So you automate the tests and add them to the regression pack. You check them by QA, which sounds like a good idea to me. So this would be, you're adding the automated tests in the following sprint from the sprint before. And this is one way to do it. There are two schools of thought on that. One says, well, done means done, and therefore all the automated tests should be in the regression pack by the end of the current sprint. And I think if you can do it that way, that's probably better. But I know a lot of people are very successful by actually doing the automation. If you're doing the testing manually within the sprint, you can then take a step back and say, well, how many of these tests really should go into the regression pack? What are the best ones to use? And which ones maybe eliminating overlap and things like that. So you're putting the tests then into the growing regression pack so your regression tests from the previous sprint have gone into the regression pack. So you're getting the benefit out of automation then from the sprint after that. And I think that is a good way to do it, yes.
Thank you. So let's see, we have one from Alexis. I find it hard to balance between becoming a great manual tester and on the other hand becoming a great automator. How do you feel about this? Is it possible for anyone to become an expert in manual testing and test automation?
That's an interesting question, Alexis. I think it's possible to do both well, yes. I think some people want to be one or the other, and I don't think anyone should be forced to be both. But I think if you have an interest both in becoming a great tester, a great manual tester, and becoming a great automator, I think that's great. So I would encourage you to carry on doing both. You might find that one appeals to you more after a while, and then you might want to follow that more. But yeah, I think getting the balance right between the two is really just a personal thing for what you enjoy doing and what you're good at. So if you can be both, go for it.
We have another question from Jamie. Where does your automation testing stop? As essentially you're building an application to execute tests, including the setup and teardown of your environment. Would you write tests to test your test architecture and tests to test those tests? Should there be testware architect testers?
Oh, I think my brain hurts, Jamie. Yes, you bring up a good point, though. If you're writing the testware, of course it is software, so it does need testing. And it is actually an important aspect of writing good testware to make sure that it is of good quality. And that might involve some testing of the testing of the tests. And yes, where to stop, I think when it seems sensible would probably be the best answer to that. But it certainly is important to be aware of the quality of the testing. But another thing which can often be used and is overlooked a lot these days is reviews. review the testware, review the tests, review the automated tests. A few years ago now, I heard a presentation at one of the STAR conferences where they had used inspection on the automated scripts because the timescales were so tight that they couldn't afford to have any failures of the automation when the software was delivered, and that was hugely successful. And this is something I think which is often overlooked these days. But yes, it's an important point, and you do need to do some of it.
Okay, thank you, Dot. We have another question from Garrett, and he says he recently attended a meeting with Geico ADSIC about specification by example, and he said that Geico talks about test automation as well and is convinced that automation should be done by developers so that the testers can continue their very good manual work. He asks, do you agree with that, and did you already cooperate with Geico about this subject and his specification by example approach?
Yes, I know Geico and have a lot of time for him. He's a very interesting guy and has some really interesting ideas. He also gave a very good presentation at EuroSTAR last year. Should automation be done by developers rather than testers? Possibly. I mean, it partly depends on the situation in your own company. If you have more scope, more availability by developers, and you want the testers to carry on designing the tests, then that, and certainly the testers are the ones who would design the tests. Whether the testers do the automation or not is something which I don't think can be specified universally. So can you read that one to me again, Miriam? I'm not quite sure about the automation done by the developer.
I can.
I mean, I think that the testers should not just be doing manual testing, but thinking about the tests that should be done, the tests that should be automated, as well as tests that should be still done manually. Not sure if I answered that.
To call it out again for you, Dot.
Let's go on to another one.
Okay.
Come back to me. If I haven't answered your question, well, then come back to me with an email.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Dot. We're actually getting a lot of compliments about the book as well. People think it's really great. So we have, let's see, we have a lot of questions, so we won't get to them all. Let's see here. There's one from, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Fazal Iqbal. I have observed that with time, companies are more into hiring programming skills testers. Let me see, programming skills testers than to have a real good skilled tester. Do you think future jobs in testing will shift to developers? I hope I'm calling that out right now. It might just got a little bit lost in translation.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you for the compliments on the book. I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you. Faza, yes, there is a trend to hiring testers who are programmers. This is not something which I would necessarily think is a good trend, but it definitely is a trend. There certainly are people who are going for hiring testers. But if you have, I mean, testing skills, my worry about this is that people will downgrade testing skills because they think, oh, as long as you're a programmer, you can do that. And one of the most famous, I suppose, examples of that, I hope I don't get into trouble for mentioning this, but I use Apple Macs. I just love, I love my MacBook Air especially. But I went over to Macs a few years ago, and I can tell you why in one word: Vista. Now, Vista was tested extensively by automation, and Microsoft at the time had a policy of hiring only testers who could also program. So they didn't have anyone who had a non-programming perspective. Now, they certainly learned from that, and Windows 7 was much better. I still love my Mac, by the way. So I think it is definitely a trend, unfortunately.
Okay, Dot. We have a comment from Ebert. The message hasn't changed in the last decade. Are we reaching the right people?
I'm not quite sure. Certainly the concerns about automation have been around for a long time. In fact, the quote about automated chaos is just faster chaos. I recently discovered back in the CAS report that was published back in 1991. So are we reaching the right people? We probably aren't reaching high-level managers in terms of what the benefits of automation can be. And that was one hope that we have for this book, is that it does show you the experiences that people have and why it is very important for managers to understand and to have the right expectations about what automation can do. So maybe we're not. Sometimes it can be a bit disheartening when you see things coming around again or not having changed. But I think we need to keep plugging away and keep trying to reach the right people where we can. I mean, if you have ideas about how to reach high-level managers and get the messages across, then please follow up on them.
Thanks, Dot. We will just take one more question, and it's actually from Garrett again, who was talking about Geico. So he says, it would be interesting to ask Dorothy if sharing her ideas with Geico would lead to a kind of new view or approach on test automation. I understand her opinion about context, which is relevant in the way the testers and developers act. But I would wish that there wouldn't be all kinds of opinions about automation in the world. Maybe a more generic approach can be defined. And Gareth says he hopes he's not too unclear with this.
Too many opinions about automation. Yes, I think, well, again, it depends on the context. Geico is very much in sort of in agile developments and so on. In that situation, then the developers are the ones who are doing the automation. But yes, I think this is something which I wish people would have more common opinions as well. I mean, there are two developing qualifications in automation, which, as I understand it, aren't actually communicating with each other, which I think is a bit of a shame. There's one offered by the Automated Testing Institute, which I haven't had a chance to evaluate yet. A brief look at it, I thought there were things that perhaps could be improved, but the ISTQB is also developing an expert level on automation. That one might be, I haven't seen that, but I know Mark Fuster is working on that, so I'm sure that would be very good. But I don't know, it seems the way the world is going with social media and fragmentation, it used to be there would be a book and everyone would read the book. And that way I think you had more common opinions. I think it's, in a sense, fragmentation of opinion is an inevitable result of the fragmentation of the way we communicate these days. Maybe that's a bit pessimistic, I don't know. But I think ultimately, if people can see what works, then things will sort of settle out in a while. Things inevitably go through a period of dispersal before they go to settle down to what people would then hopefully agree would be a good way forward. Interesting thoughts. Thanks very much, Garrett. And everyone else who asked a question.
Okay, thanks very much, Dot, and thank you to everyone who's asked a question. Now, we won't get to them all in the time that we have today, but I will email all your questions to Dorothy and we will get them up on the EuroSTAR blog hopefully by next week. So I'd just like to remind you all that our chat session will take place after the last webinar today, which is with Michael D. Kelly, and you will be emailed a link to the chat which will enable you to access it and discuss what you've learned and your experiences this week. So I'd just like to thank Dorothy again for taking the time out today to give a great presentation, and this webinar is now over. Thank you.